Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on to another episode of Why I Love Flagler County, your local podcast spotlighting local businesses and local residents on what they love about being a part of Flagler County. So today, I'm super excited to have my guest Jesenia with us today. Jesenia, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Well, Gisani and I met. We had kind of known each other off social media, but we were able to meet a little while ago at one of the Bold Ladies networking events, and I got to know a little bit about what she's doing, and I was like, I would love to talk about this on the podcast, kind of share the message because you work in a very amazing niche, but you juggle a few different things on that. So I'll let you explain that, but first, why don't we just kick it off pretty easy and just kind of share about your journey coming here to Flagler.
Yeah, so that was a God-driven decision. Um, but yeah, we were actually living in Orlando, and for some reason, we were like beach hopping on the East Coast. We started in Melbourne, and we would just kind of explore different beaches. For some reason, Palm Coast Beach stuck, and we would come every other weekend. We would drive an hour and a half and just come and visit the beach. And we just started to notice things around here, and we're like, wow, the people here are so nice. And like pre-COVID, I don't know, it's kind of changed a little bit, but everybody waved, and we were so confused because one, I'm from New York. We don't we don't wave to each other. And so it was, and even though I lived in Georgia, which Southern hospitality does exist, um, it was different and it just felt different. And we just started to slowly fall in love with it. And then we had the opportunity, and eventually we were able to buy what we thought was our dream home here, and we kind of settled down, and I was able to do that even though in Orlando I was still finishing up my master's, and at the same time I was on active duty military. So it was a lot, but we loved it here so much that I was able to sacrifice and be able to be here as well.
Yeah, no, that's so lovely. I'm so glad that that's how you kind of found podcast. I absolutely love asking that question, and I've said it so many times, but I love hearing everyone's story on how they find podcast because I feel like, I don't mean this in a mean way, but you know how sometimes people wake up in their hometown and are like, well, I can't wait to move to LA. I really want to move to New York or, like
Mhm.
those like Chicago maybe, right? No one really says that about Palm Coast, right? But they find it in this really like different way. Sometimes people have family members or a friend, or they drove through here on vacation, or like you said, you were kind of beach hopping and you just really loved Flagler. And it's just so fascinating to hear everyone's story. So I think that was really awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Actually, that actually reminds me, I was driving in 2016 when I first commissioned as an officer. I had to go to training, and we drove all the way to Arizona from South Florida. And I remember driving through Flagler County, and I was like, this is so interesting over here. Like, this is so cool. It would be awesome to kind of. And then, of course, we went into St. John's where we saw like the house on stilts, and we were like, this is odd. I had never seen that before, and I was just so like fascinated by Flagler County before, and like all the manatee mailboxes and
Yes.
I literally pinch myself now, and I'm like, I cannot believe that in 2016 we noticed this place and slowly started like how we are here. Like I said, very God incidents,
Yes.
but but we're here.
Yeah, those are sometimes, obviously the best plans. And it's so funny, hindsight is so 2020, right? And you see all those little seeds that God planted in your life, and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this is how it was going to unfold. But I mean, obviously we're so glad that it did. And it's just so insane. Like from us, like we used to live in Michigan, and then we used to
Mhm.
snowbird here in Kissimmee. But then one year we didn't want to go to Kissimmee, and then we went to Port Orange. And
Mhm.
because of Port Orange, we were able to find Palm Coast. And it's just those like little things of like, well, we thought we would always move to maybe like Kissimmee or Orlando or something like that, maybe more central. And then we ended up more on the coast. And it's like, it's just those small things. You're like, oh, that's what that was.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, well, thank you. That's awesome. So, of course, huge thank you so much for your service. I think that's amazing what you're doing, and you're juggling this with your other business. So, I'll let you kind of share your story on how, because you do therapy and you help people with a lot of processing when it comes to those things. So, I'll let you share and take me through kind of what that journey looks like for you.
Yeah. So I actually never really wanted to be a therapist. I was always complaining like I have my own problems. I don't need to listen to other people's problems. But it's like when you have that natural thing that everybody's always coming to you. And I was like, maybe I should learn how to do this in a healthy,
Nice.
professional way,
Yeah.
versus just people constantly venting to me and I'm like taking that on. So
Yeah.
um yeah, and I joined the military. I've been in for 14 years
Wow.
so far. So time flies when you're having fun and carrying really heavy stuff.
I'm sure it's very heavy.
Yes. Uh, so yeah, so I did that back in '09. I joined while I was in college. And then I had like an existential like flip of what I wanted to do. And I ended up in psychology for some crazy reason. Again, very God driven. Um, and that happened actually because I wanted to be a teacher for so long. And then I got an internship and I was like, ooh, and it put together psychology and teaching together. And I was able to see the research side of it. I was able to see master's level clinicians. I was able to see the doctorate level clinicians and the people that were going for their doctorates. And I was just so impressed by it all. And I was so fascinated. And I literally changed my major. It's been a little while. My major, as soon as I finished that internship, I was like, I want to be one of them. And I started that journey, and here I am. I was working in a group practice before, based in Orlando, but I started my own private practice in last June. So I'm almost here at my year mark.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you. And it's been, it was a little scary at first, to make the jump. But I really trusted in my skills and my abilities and what I have to bring to the table. Everybody's different. I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but that's okay. And now I'm almost at my year mark and I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot and my practice is thriving for what I believe is thriving. And yeah, and I specialize in complex trauma and PTSD, depression, anxiety, and I'm dually licensed, so I'm a mental health therapist and marriage and family. Um, so just
Nice.
getting those two was a whole journey too, because
Oh,
I
I'm
had to take
sure.
two exams and
Oh gosh. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I am now, and I I'm licensed in Florida, so what that means is I can see virtually anyone in the state of Florida, not just where I am. So COVID did have its pros in that regard
Right.
because our field has really grown in that area.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And it's really amazing what you are able to help with. And it's so fun that you talk about, you got into teaching and then the psychology of teaching. Because I was just talking to another lady and not too long ago, and then also my parents, because, it's a very small time. I just like volunteer for an hour, every other week at church for the 3-year-olds, right? And I was just telling my parents that it's like, well, obviously I don't have everything figured out. I have most things not figured out, right? But they're so young kids, and there's definitely that whole like psychology behind it, right? Of being able to approach it in a way that makes sense to them, right? Because they're still learning, and they may do things that frustrate us, but it's not their fault. They're not trying to do it just to make us frustrate, maybe sometimes, but very rarely, right? They don't really understand what's going on. So I was telling them, like me trying to figure out ways, like I have a little boy in my class who loves to just take things from other kids. I'm like, well, I can't
Mhm.
just take it back from him, right? I have to find a way to approach it because if I just take it from him, what does he learn other than if you take the toy, you get the toy? I'm like,
Mhm.
there's so many different ways, and if someone's not in that field, they can forget that there are all these things that go on behind the scenes when it comes to making curriculums, when it goes to being a teacher, and then of course leading into something that you're doing now. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. That's a huge thing that I love to highlight and kind of discuss.
Yeah. And if you can imagine, like us as adults, right? Some of us,
Right.
we have trouble connecting the dots. We have
Right.
trouble sometimes with tasks, and we have trouble trying to figure out different complex situations. How will a small 3, 4 year
Right.
old who's nowhere near developed? Uh, and so, of course, I would throw a tantrum too if someone took my toy.
Right.
Um, but I do love that I didn't have to leave all the teaching behind because my clients will tell you I teach in session all the time, and I have to tell them, like, please tell me when I'm teaching too much. Like that, just, but I love to provide psychoeducation because for me and my and how I grew up, I didn't learn most of this stuff. And so, really, I was learning so much of it while I was learning to be a therapist, and it was
Mm-hmm.
so like life changing, but also a little overwhelming
Sure.
because I didn't know a lot
Right.
of it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this has been out there for so long. What? I've been living under a rock.
Yeah, and I think there's a really common misconception when it comes to therapists, when it comes to therapy sessions or talking to someone, that it's just like you come up, you show up for an hour, and then you just dump all of your problems on someone. And that's really not how most sessions work if you want to talk a little bit on clearing up that kind of misconception. Because I know it's easy to think that way.
Yeah. Oh no, it's like a roller coaster of so many different things. We teach a little bit, we cry, we laugh, yes, we process things. I don't, I'm 90% virtual, so I don't even have a couch. Like I don't, that's not an actual thing. For most therapists, people do have couches, but we don't really like lay down and like tell me
Right.
about your dreams. And there are dream interpreters, which is fine.
Yeah.
um, but it's not everybody, right? That's not
Sure.
the essence of therapy. And yeah, there's so many things my clients will share like TikTok videos with me and Instagram posts that they felt resonated with them, and we talk
Right.
about them in session. And it it is anything under the sun that you feel you have a safe space in this session that we are having for you to bring up. There's no dumb questions. I know so many clients are like, I know this is a dumb question. There are no dumb questions.
Right.
And there are no, another thing that I feel clients are afraid to bring up sometimes are like they're really quote unquote negative, like nasty
Mm,
thoughts that come up in their head. And I try to remind them, like, this is the place. We
right.
want to hear them, even if it's really bad, like like I really want to punch this person in the face. Okay, in order to not get to the behavior, we have to talk about what is happening in your body. What's the root cause of it so that we don't get to that point. But anyways, I digress. But yes,
Yeah.
lots of different things that happen in therapy, which can make it fun sometimes, and sometimes it can make it really heavy. But either way, those are both needed.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's really important that people are always seeking out because I know me, like when I make any decision, and this isn't even like when it's very like, oh, this is a life or death. Like even sometimes like what should I eat? Like should I have this or that? I need like second opinions. And I like ask my parents, I'm like, hey, which one should I eat? And they're like, whatever one you want. And I'm like, but I don't know. Can you like help me? So that's really a huge role that you as the therapist plays. You can kind of be someone's, support system and kind of cheerleader. Not that you're going to necessarily endorse every single behavior, right? But you're able to help them and do it in a safe space that we mentioned that, we can kind of expel a lot of these negative thoughts, negative things, so they don't bubble up into, like you mentioned, actions of actually punching someone in the face. We stop it before it gets there. So Jesenia, thank you so much for coming on, sharing a few minutes of your time. This has been really fun. I think this is such an important topic to talk about at all times. It's just the more knowledge we get out there, the more exposure people have, the more comfortable people can have when it's something, going to therapy, that can be very vulnerable. So as long as people start learning a little bit more about, like you and how you help people, it's really awesome. So thank you again for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun.
Of course. And before I wrap it up, what is the best way that people can learn a little bit more about you, about how to contact you if they have any questions?
Sure. Well, I have my Facebook group page, and it's Invisible Wounds Counseling on Facebook. I have my Instagram, which is Invisible Wounds Therapist, and it's the same as my TikTok. I don't do dancing videos, but I try to I try to be I cope with humor, so I try to
Yeah,
be funny. I try to integrate therapy things with some of the funny things on there. So,
nice.
and I do have my website, which is Jesenia Villoldo.com, which also leads to my Psychology Today page.
Perfect. So I'll make sure I have all those links in the description so people can check out that a little bit easier. I know TikTok's a big one right now. Coping through humor is my favorite way to do it as well. So there we
Yes.
go. Well, again, Jasenia, thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate it. And to everyone listening, thank you so much. I really appreciate you as well. And I will see you next time.